Today, we are taking on what might be one of the most intellectually punishing journeys ever put to paper.
That's putting it mildly.
We are diving deep into George Orwell's chilling masterpiece, 1984.
And our mission today is very, very specific. We're looking at the architecture of Big Brother's ultimate eternal triumph.
Right. We're moving past the initial setup and focusing really intensely on those critical final sections.
From the moment Winston Smith feels that first spark of revolutionary hope, right through to the brutal, systematic destruction of his memory, his reality, and his innermost self.
We've got excerpts that cover everything: the mystery of the Brotherhood, the deep dive into party structure from Goldstein's forbidden book, the absolute horror of the Ministry of Love.
And, maybe most importantly, the technical manual for perpetual control, the Newspeak appendix.
We aren't just summarizing here. We're trying to really understand how a state achieves total, permanent control over the individual mind. So let's not waste a second. We start with the final defiant stand of human affection.
So, before the trap springs, before the Ministry of Love becomes a reality, Winston and Julia, they try to define the boundary of their rebellion.
They do. They have this conversation that's all about what the party cannot touch.
Yeah.
This idea of the inviolate inner self.
And Winston, he sets the stage for this by thinking about his mother.
Right. And he remembers her not as being smart or political, but as having this kind of nobility, a kind of purity.
And why? What was the source of that nobility?
Because her standards were completely private. Her feelings, her sense of right and wrong, they just could not be altered from outside.
And that idea that there's an inherent, untouchable moral core inside a person, that's what he's clinging to as proof of what it means to be human.
And it immediately makes him draw this line in the sand. He makes this crucial distinction saying, the proles are human beings, we are not human.
Which is such a revealing statement.
Wow.
He basically recognizes that to live inside the party with the constant surveillance and the doublethink, you have to give up those fundamental private qualities.
Things like trust, real loyalty, emotions that aren't, manufactured for a hate rally.
Exactly. The proles, because they're ignored by the telescreens for the most part, they get to keep their humanity. They still operate on those private, personal, moral codes.
So that distinction, it just raises the stakes, doesn't it? It leads right to this ethical question. Is confessing under torture the real betrayal?
Right. If you can save that core self, and this is where they make their pact. They know they'll confess. Winston says it plainly. Everybody always confesses. They accept the physical reality of pain.
But then Julia comes in with this incredible insight. She says confession is not the betrayal.
No. The true betrayal, she says, is if they make me stop loving you.
And she's so confident about it, they can't get inside you. It's the one thing they can't do, she insists.
It's this belief that if they can just hold on to that core feeling, that private love, then they've beaten them.
That's the ultimate fantasy of resistance in this world, isn't it? The belief that love is like a law of nature, something the party can't just legislate away.
They're building this last-ditch internal defense mechanism. Their consciousness, their emotion, that's their fortress.
And that belief system is precisely why the party needs something like the Ministry of Love.
Exactly. I mean, controlling behavior is the easy part. That's just cameras and force. But Ingsoc wants absolute power.
And absolute power demands control of the soul.
The party cannot tolerate a single thought or feeling that it didn't create. This tiny personal definition of humanity that they've built, that's the final frontier.
And the whole tragedy of the book is watching that frontier get not just crossed, but completely annihilated.
The stage is set. They've defined what they believe is impossible. Now we see the mechanisms that convince Winston his rebellion is real.
This hope for an organized external rebellion really gets going with the meeting with O'Brien. And this whole scene is just a masterclass in psychological manipulation.
It starts with this incredible display of privilege, a real power move.
O'Brien turns off the telescreen.
It's just like that. And Winston is floored. I mean, the constant monitoring, that buzzing sound, it's the absolute condition of his life.
And O'Brien just silences it. And that one act gives him this terrifying authority and credibility. Winston just drops all his suspicion.
It's interesting, too, that Winston's motives are so vague. He even admits he doesn't really know what help he's looking for.
Just that he wants to fight the party. And O'Brien plays the part of the seasoned revolutionary perfectly. He confirms it all. The Brotherhood exists. Goldstein is real.
But then he immediately pours cold water on the whole romantic idea of rebellion. He says the Brotherhood is not an organization in the ordinary sense.
That's just an idea.
An idea which is indestructible. It's like this invisible generational conspiracy that's built to last for centuries.
And the rules he lays out for them. It's like a contract written in pure despair. You'll fight in the dark, you'll get orders you don't understand.
And you will absolutely 100% be caught and forced to confess.
O'Brien makes it crystal clear. There is no safety net, no comradeship. We never help our members, he says.
The best you can hope for is a razor blade smuggled in so you can silence yourself. The only fate for a revolutionary is total sacrifice.
We are the dead.
Their only real life is in some distant, imagined future. It's the bleakest job description imaginable.
But for Winston, it's enough. It confirms that his private, intellectual rebellion is shared. And that's all he needs. O'Brien promises to get him Goldstein's forbidden book.
And that promise of intellectual ammunition comes right before the ultimate display of the party's control over objective reality.
We hit Chapter 9, the peak of hate week, and the famous mid-sentence war switch.
The scene is a total frenzy. The crowd is at this peak of orgiastic triumph, just screaming hatred at images of Eurasian soldiers.
And then a messenger hands the speaker a little slip of paper.
And the switch is instantaneous. Mid-sentence, suddenly the enemy isn't Eurasia anymore, it's Eastasia. And Eurasia is now, and has always been, our faithful ally.
The psychology of the crowd here is fascinating. They don't question it for a second. Instead, they turn their rage on the physical evidence of the old story.
Right. The posters, the banners, they're now seen as sabotage from Goldstein's agents. It's not that the party made a mistake, it's that the enemy was trying to trick them.
And this kicks off what the book calls the rectification frenzy. Winston is just buried in work at the Ministry of Truth.
He works over 90 hours in 5 days, just destroying every single document, every photo, every mention of the 4-year war with Eurasia.
And they succeed. They make it impossible for any human being to prove by documentary evidence that the war with Eurasia had ever happened.
Yeah.
The past is just gone, vaporized.
And only after that grueling experience, after participating in this massive act of historical erasure, does the book finally arrive.
So let's dig into Goldstein's text. We'll start with the chapter that explains the party's economic logic. Chapter 3, War is Peace.
Goldstein's book basically confirms what Winston suspected. The world is split into 3 giant perpetual superstates, Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia.
And their political philosophies, Ingsoc, neo-Bolshevism, this thing called death worship, they're all barely distinguishable.
They're just 3 identical totalitarian systems built on continuous, low-grade warfare.
And the big question Goldstein answers is, why? Why the constant war? He gives 2 main reasons. The first is economic.
Right. The primary goal is to use up the massive surplus of goods that an industrial society creates.
Without actually raising the standard of living for the masses.
Precisely. Because if the masses, the lows as he calls them, if they got leisure time and education and comfort, they would become aware of their oppression. They'd start to think.
And they'd want equality.
Yeah.
So the surplus has to be destroyed.
And sure, you could just build mountains of useless stuff and burn it, but war is so much better because it's emotionally justifiable. You're constantly pouring resources into weapons that are never really used up, which keeps everyone poor and desperate.
It maintains the scarcity you need to keep the hierarchy in place.
Exactly.
But that raises a question. Why bother with the Ministry of Plenty at all? If reality is subjective, why not just declare that everyone is full?
Well, Goldstein explains that. The state has to maintain just enough actual misery, just enough physical scarcity to keep the low focused only on survival. That prevents them from thinking about revolution.
So the first purpose is economic. The second one, the psychological purpose, is where the real horror is.
The state of war provides the emotional basis for a hierarchical society. The party needs its members to be in a constant state of fear, hatred, adulation, and orgiastic triumph.
And war, real or not, gives them the perfect external reason for their total power and their demand for blind loyalty.
This leads to the big reveal that the war is largely an imposture, since all 3 superstates are too big and self-sufficient to ever actually conquer each other.
They're just propping each other up like 3 sheaves of corn.
The conflict becomes a purely internal affair. The war is waged by the ruling class against its own people to keep the social structure frozen.
Goldstein points out that permanent peace would be just as dangerous to the party as a decisive war.
Right. Without an external enemy, the party loses its main excuse for having absolute power.
And that's the inner meaning of the slogan, war is peace. War is the machine that maintains eternal social hierarchy.
Okay, so now we shift to chapter 1 of Goldstein's book, Ignorance is Strength. This part lays out the historical and sociological reasons Ingsoc works.
This is the sociology textbook part. It lays out the classic cycle of history. You have the high, who are in power.
The middle, who want to take over by pretending to help the low.
And the low, the oppressed, who are too beaten down to have any goal beyond just, basic equality.
And history, Goldstein shows, is just this repeating cycle where the middle eventually overthrows the high by promising freedom, only to become the new high.
But this is where Ingsoc brings its dark innovation. Unlike past tyrannies, which were often half-hearted and inefficient and tried to justify themselves with religion or social good,
Ingsoc is different. It consciously aims to make unfreedom and inequality permanent. It wants to freeze history in place forever.
they are more conscious of what they were doing and more intent on crushing opposition. And the key factor that makes it all possible is technology.
The invention of print, film, and especially the two-way telescreen means that for the first time in history, private life can be completely eliminated.
The party can enforce not just obedience, but complete uniformity of opinion on all subjects.
And this explains why the proles never revolt on their own. They're not allowed to have any standards of comparison.
They're kept distracted, unaware of how bad things are, just living in this bubble of immediate, simple concerns.
So the only real threat to the party comes from within its own ranks, from a new group of smart, ambitious people, or from the elite themselves going soft. The problem is purely educational.
Meaning you have to continuously mold the consciousness of the party members themselves.
And this is where you get the core psychological tool of the party. Doublethink.
Look at the names of the ministries. They're deliberately contradictory. The Ministry of Peace runs the war. The Ministry of Truth tells lies. The Ministry of Love tortures people.
And the Ministry of Plenty oversees starvation. It's not just hypocrisy, it's a required mental state.
Doublethink. The ability to hold two contradictory beliefs in your mind at the same time and accept both of them.
To know and not to know, it's controlled insanity. The inner party member has to know, on some level, that the war is a fake designed to maintain power.
While also believing, with total conviction, that the war is real and righteous and must be won.
It creates a kind of deadly helplessness. The party can change the facts every day, and a mind trained in doublethink just smooths over the contradiction without a second thought.
And reading all this, Winston realizes it's just a systemization of the madness he's lived his whole life. But he clings to one thought. Sanity is not statistical.
Being a minority of one doesn't make you crazy as long as you hold on to the truth.
But that moment of clarity, that feeling of safety while he's reading the book, is shattered, instantly and brutally.
While he's reading, he looks out the window and he's admiring the pearl washerwoman. He sees her sturdiness, her fertility, her vitality. She's a symbol of real, uncorrupted life. He even murmurs that she's beautiful.
And in that exact moment of appreciating something real and beautiful outside the party's control, that's when they close in.
Winston says to Julia, "We are the dead." And an iron voice from behind the picture repeats his own words back to him, "You are the dead."
The trap springs, the telescreen is revealed, and the voice, that cultivated thin voice that sang the nursery rhyme, is Mr. Charrington.
The harmless old shopkeeper who rented them the room thought police all along.
The violence is immediate. Julia is hit in the solar plexus, just hauled out like a sack of potatoes.
And Winston sees his cherished symbol of their private life. The coral paperweight smashed to pieces on the floor. The physical rebellion is over.
And the psychological destruction is about to begin. The transition is fast, cruel, and absolute.
Part 3 opens in the Ministry of Love, Minaluv, and we have to just stop and picture the setting. It's not some dark medieval dungeon.
No, it's a high-ceilinged, windowless cell. The walls are glittering white porcelain. There's this constant cold light and 4 telescreens.
It is terrifyingly the place with no darkness.
That clean, clinical setting is so much more disturbing than a dungeon. It suggests scientific, efficient cruelty. The party is being transparent about what it's doing.
Torture isn't hidden away. It's a clinical process of re-education. And Winston is immediately degraded, weak, focused only on the pain in his stomach, clinging to this tiny, futile hope of a razor blade from the Brotherhood.
And his own definition of betrayal is immediately put to the test. He knows he shouldn't betray Julia, but in that state of terror, he feels no love for her.
He recognizes his loyalty has just become an intellectual decision. The physical reality of suffering starts to erase the abstract idea of loyalty they'd agreed on.
And the cell itself is designed to reinforce that. You see this brutal, animalistic reality of survival. A guard knocks a man's teeth out. Another prisoner has his fingers broken for just clinging to a bench.
It's all designed to break solidarity, to reduce everyone to their most basic survival instinct, to eliminate any idea of mutual protection.
And then the ultimate betrayer walks in. O'Brien.
Winston, still holding on to this fantasy of a shared rebellion, he cries out, "They've got you too."
And O'Brien's response is just chilling. So mild, so regretful. They got me a long time ago. You did know it. You have always known it.
It confirms everything. O'Brien wasn't just a party member. He was Winston's custom-made tormentor, the architect of his downfall, who'd been studying him from the very first moment they met.
The torture process itself is cyclical. It starts with just raw physical brutality. Fists, truncheons, boots, screaming, blood, vomiting.
But that's only the first phase. It's immediately followed by stupor and then medical rehabilitation. They give him soup, they shave him, they check his health.
They need him healthy enough to break him again. It's this perverted form of care.
And then the psychological warfare begins, carried out by party intellectuals. This is constant, low-level pain and humiliation. Slapping, pulling his hair, shining lights in his eyes.
And the goal isn't just to get a confession. It's about achieving total self-abasement.
Winston confesses to everything. Assassinations he never committed, spying for Anastasia, being a sexual pervert, even murdering his wife. He'll say anything.
But the real core of the re-education is the destruction of objective reality in memory. Winston is struggling to remember the war switch.
And O'Brien just calmly asserts, Oceania has always been at war with Anastasia.
This is where the mind games just reach their peak. O'Brien produces the photograph, the one of Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford. The physical proof Winston once held that the party had lied.
Winston sees it, he knows he was right, and then O'Brien immediately snatches it away and dismisses it as a hallucination, denies he ever showed it to him, and then denies that he denied it.
The psychological terror of that is the deadly helplessness it creates, the realization that O'Brien might genuinely have forgotten what just happened, that this lunatic dislocation of memory is the norm for him. That's what defeats Winston intellectually.
How can you argue with someone whose reality is constantly shifting?
You can't. So O'Brien then challenges objective reality itself. He says the past only exists in records and in human memories.
And since the party controls both, reality is not external. Whatever the party holds to be the truth is truth.
To become sane in the party's world, Winston has to perform this act of self-destruction.
Which brings us to maybe the most visceral, famous scene of mind control in all of literature, the Four Fingers test.
O'Brien holds up 4 fingers. Winston knows it's 4, but O'Brien uses the dial, the electroshock machine, to force him to see 5.
And we need to really dig into this. It's not just about getting him to lie, it's about forcing his actual perception to change. The pain is just incredible. The dial clicks up to 35.
Winston is screaming, trying to hold on to the truth, but under that agony, he's forced to say 5. He knows physically there are 4, but he has to agree to 5 to make the pain stop.
The party proves that physical reality, when it conflicts with party doctrine, can be completely overridden by power and pain. They control his sensory input.
So once objective reality is gone, Winston makes one last feeble attempt at a defense. He argues that the party must be doing all this for our own good. He's hoping for the classic tyrant's excuse.
That the control is just a means to some utopian end, and O'Brien just blasts him with pain for even suggesting it.
And this is where we get the revelation of the why. This is the central, unique insight of the whole novel.
O'Brien tells him the truth is so much darker than any tyranny that's come before. The party seeks power entirely for its own sake. Only power, pure power.
We have to emphasize how different this is. Historically, dictators, kings, communists, fascists, they always claim some higher purpose. Divine right, the will of the people, a vision of a better society.
Power was always a means to an end, even if that end was monstrous.
But Ingsoc is unique because it strips away every pretense. O'Brien says it flat out. Power is not a means, it is an end.
The object is pure power, and pure power is only demonstrated by inflicting suffering and humiliation. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power.
It's a self-justifying system, locked into its own horrific function forever. That's what makes it so terrifying.
And O'Brien drives home the scope of this power, not just over men, but over the cosmos itself. He claims the stars are just bits of fire a few kilometers away and that the party could blot them out.
They can maintain a dual system of astronomy through doublethink. It's not just controlling facts, it's controlling the universe.
Winston's final desperate protest is to appeal to some kind of innate human decency, the spirit of man. He says, life will defeat you.
And O'Brien just crushes that too. We create human nature. Men are infinitely malleable. The party is immortal. The individual is nothing.
O'Brien confirms Winston has been broken, has confessed to everything, has betrayed everyone, his mother, his wife, Julia, and he promises Winston that everyone is eventually cured. And then they're shot.
But first, he has to face his final fear.
So chapter 4 opens, and Winston has been moved from the active torture phase into a kind of rehabilitation. He's cleaned, he's well-fed, he's getting meat and cigarettes. They even give him new dentures and treat his ulcer.
The constant bright light and regular food are now comforting to him. He's getting fat. He's physically accepting his new reality.
And that physical comfort is a deliberate tool. It makes the mental acceptance easier. Winston realizes he was ready to give up a long time ago, so he decides to re-educate himself.
He starts practicing the mental gymnastics. He writes the party's core principles on his slate. Freedom is slavery, 2 and 2 make 5, and God is power.
He's intellectually compliant. He accepts the new history. Oceania has always been at war with Eastasia. The photograph never existed.
He's learning Crime Stop. That's the instinctive ability to just develop a blind spot for dangerous thoughts, to stop a logical process before it becomes heresy.
He realizes that stupidity was as necessary as intelligence and as difficult to attain. He is, for all intents and purposes, intellectually compliant, but O'Brien knows that's not enough.
Because there's still one tiny unconquered part of him. In a moment of just blissful daydreaming about the golden country, he cries out, Julia, 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 my love.
It's an eruption from his unconscious self. And he realizes in that moment that he still hates the party, even if he can't say it or even consciously think it.
He resolves that when the bullet finally comes, his hatred will just erupt for a split second. They would have blown his brain to pieces before they could reclaim it.
To die hating them, that was freedom. And that tiny internal defiance confirms to O'Brien that the cure is incomplete. The innermost self is still somehow inviolate.
And this leads directly to the final stage. Room 101.
O'Brien reappears and confirms it. Winston had thoughts of deceiving him. And O'Brien explains that for every person, there is something unendurable, a pure, primal fear that pain alone can't conquer.
For Winston, it's rats.
O'Brien describes the horror in detail. Their carnivorous nature, their intelligence, their use as a punishment in Imperial China. And then he brings out the wire cage mask with 2 large, hungry rats inside, designed to fit over Winston's face.
We have to slow down here and really recognize what this represents. It's absolute primal terror, the kind of fear that just overrides all civilized thought, all loyalty, all love.
The physical closeness of the rats, the smell of them, the certainty of what's about to happen. It pushes Winston beyond that intellectual definition of betrayal they'd agreed on in the room over the shop.
Faced with the absolute destruction of his own self, he finds the only escape route.
He transfers the punishment. He screams frantically, do it to Julia, not me, Julia, not me.
And the breaking of that core self is complete. He sacrifices his love, the one thing they can't do, to save his own body.
That cry is the party's true victory. Winston is broken. He has proven O'Brien's theory. Men are infinitely malleable. He loved something, his own body, more than the integrity of his private standard of loyalty.
As O'Brien releases the mechanism, Winston falls backward into these enormous depths, away from the rats and completely away from Julia. The final, inviolate boundary has been breached.
And then the story jumps ahead. We're in the aftermath, in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, which is this place of quiet, managed despair.
Winston is physically bloated, coarsened. He's drinking gin, which he calls his life, his death, and his resurrection, a total parody of salvation. He has a meaningless job. He's mentally slow. He's compliant.
He instinctively accepts whatever the current war narrative is, Oceania versus Eurasia, without a second thought. He even finds comfort in chess problems, noting that white always mates, a symbol of the unvarying triumph of good over evil.
Which, in his new reality, is Big Brother.
Then he runs into Julia, by chance. And the physical change in her is just immediate and painful. She's sallower, she has a scar, her body has gotten thicker and stiffened like a corpse.
The connection between them is completely gone.
And their mutual confession is just brutal in its honesty. They both say it, I betrayed you. Julia explains what Room 101 does to you. At the time when it happens, you do mean it. All you care about is yourself.
It wasn't just words spoken under duress. It was a genuine self-serving transfer of suffering. And Winston echoes that. All you care about is yourself.
And because that love was transferred, because they genuinely wished that horror on each other, they can't feel the same way anymore. The love, that last piece of their independent spirit, has been cauterized. It's gone.
The meeting ends, and Winston doesn't want Julia. He wants to get back to the warm, comforting stupor of the cafe in his gin. His unconscious mind struggles one last time, and he traces in the dust on the table. 2 + 2 = 5.
The reflex of defiance is almost completely extinguished.
Then a news bulletin announces some great victory in Africa. Winston watches himself accept the lie. He even pushes away a true, haunting memory of his mother, dismissing it as a false memory.
The struggle is finished. He looks up at the giant face of Big Brother, and he finally feels the pure, overwhelming adoration that O'Brien promised him.
The long-hoped-for bullet was entering his brain. He loved Big Brother.
Winston Smith is dead. The party's victory over the individual is total, but to make sure that victory is permanent for all future generations, the system has to be made linguistically immortal.
And to really grasp the finality of that control, we have to look at the technical manual that Orwell includes at the very end of the novel, the Newspeak Appendix. This is the language designed to make political rebellion literally impossible.
The appendix is like a technical analysis of the ultimate weapon. Let's be very clear about the purpose of Newspeak. It is designed not to expand expression, but to diminish the range of thought.
The goal is that once Old Speak or Standard English is forgotten, a heretical thought will be literally unthinkable.
Because the very words you would need to form that thought just won't exist anymore.
The main technique is just drastic vocabulary reduction. They eliminate undesirable words, and they strip the remaining words of any unorthodox or secondary meanings.
Take a word like free. It still exists, but only in a technical sense, like the field is free from weeds or you are free from lice.
The concept of political freedom, of intellectual freedom, has been eliminated. It's become nameless, and so it's linguistically inaccessible.
And every single one of these reductions is seen as a game because it lessens the temptation for people to think. The language is aggressively simplified. Words are combined into a single noun verb.
So the word think serves as both the noun thought and the verb to think. And this clipped, simple structure is meant to discourage any kind of nuance or depth.
This simplification leads us to what's called the B vocabulary. These are the politically constructed compound words that are designed to impose a desirable mental attitude.
These are the words we all know: good think, belly feel, minute true.
And the function of the B vocabulary is really profound. A word like belly feel forces the user to have an emotional, uncritical acceptance of party doctrine, not an intellectual one.
They're verbal shortcuts. They pack these complex ideological concepts into one short, easy-to-say word. They are designed to be spoken without taking thought.
This whole structure encourages a gabbling, staccato, and monotonous style of speech. It's designed to bypass consciousness entirely.
And this is what the party calls duck speak, to quack like a duck.
If the opinions you're quacking are orthodox, then duck speak is praise. The ultimate goal is that your speech should just issue from your larynx without involving your higher brain centers at all.
The individual just becomes a biological mouthpiece for party dogma, not a thinking agent.
The power of Newspeak is that it makes reasoned argument impossible. An unorthodox opinion, like Big Brother is ungood, is grammatically possible, but you can't support it with an argument.
Because the necessary words, the concepts of goodness outside the party, of ethical opposition, they just don't exist in the vocabulary anymore.
And when Old Speak is finally gone for good, which is scheduled for the year 2050, the last link to the past will be severed forever. All the pre-revolutionary literature, the great works of human liberty, they can't be translated while keeping their original meaning.
Just think about a passage like the Declaration of Independence, that whole revolutionary philosophical idea of inalienable rights and freedom.
Would be rendered into Newspeak as a single word: crime think.
The possibility of rebellion, even as a memory, is linguistically erased.
The party doesn't just need to control the past. It has to control the very structure by which the future perceives reality. Newspeak ensures that rebellion doesn't just fail, it becomes a conceptual impossibility.
So our deep dive into these final chapters of 1984 reveals a state that is committed not just to tyranny, but to absolute metaphysical control.
Big Brother's victory requires controlling the body, mastering objective reality through pain, and finally destroying the individual's inner self by forcing the ultimate betrayal.
And that system of absolute control is then made permanent, immortalized through the linguistic prison of Newspeak.
The final devastating question the novel leaves you with, based on the structure of that language, is this. If the framework of our language dictates the very boundaries of our consciousness and the governing power controls that language, does free will simply become a grammatical error?
That is something profound to mull over, the relationship between the vocabulary we use and the thoughts we are able to form. Thank you for joining us for this intense deep dive.